Thank you so much for listening to PoliticalStorm.com. You know, sometimes there is a topic that I could tell you everything I know, and that would take all of 30 seconds or so. So I always reach out to people that are way smarter than me. And when it comes to anything to do with currency, I've got a guy that I always reach out to. His name is AndyGause. Andy is a very smart man. He is a currency expert. And he says, you know, all the talk we've been hearing about making America great again, he says we can do that by getting rid of the IRS, saying goodbye to income taxes and saying hello to tariffs on imports. We're going to catch up with Andy today to find out how all of that works. But let's first start by saying welcome to the program. AndyGause, how are you today, sir?
Oh, fabulous. And yourself?
Very good. It's always a fun time to chat with you. And every time we've talked, I've learned a lot, and I'm expecting to learn a lot again today. So as we've got the presidential elections going on, and we keep hearing about this Make America Great Again, you've kind of got a different idea on how to do that, don't you?
Well, I do. And, Donald Trump is the only candidate that's touched upon the subject, and that's the idea of import tariffs.
An import tariff, let's explain that so people that are listening that don't understand that, let's make sure they understand what an import tariff is.
Yeah, I've discussed it with so many politicians, they don't understand it. The reality is that for the first 150, 175 years of this country's existence, the majority of the revenue to the federal government was from tariffs, from imported goods. So essentially it was the Coast Guard was the IRS. And you steamed your ship into port, and, here comes the Coast Guard. And they open up your stores and count everything and then submit you a bill. Here's your bill for taking advantage of the greatest marketplace in the world. The way the system works right now, Mitsubishi Corporation pays less in taxes in the United States, income taxes, than a typical working American.
Oh, wow.
You believe that? That seems ridiculous. So on top of not paying any tax on the income that they squeeze out of the U.S. economy, they bring their goods in without any tax whatsoever. So an import tariff says tax the goods, and a foreign income tax says tax the profit. Does it seem ridiculous or asinine that the American public foots the bill for the entire system while foreign corporations pay no income tax and no import tariff? No, not to me.
So now how would imposing a tariff on imported goods, how would that affect the American labor force? Would that be a good thing or would that be a bad thing?
Well, many say because the poor, or the lower income folks, spend the greater percentage of their money, it would be an unfair tax burden to them since so many get tax refunds through the income tax program. They get earned income credits and so forth. But I think the elimination of the income tax would be a boon to the U.S. economy in that no longer would businesses have to fill out tax returns. No longer would individuals have to fill out tax returns. All of that work would not be necessary, except for the state income taxes, which I imagine at some point will have to fall in line. From the federal government's point of view, they collected tariff on imported goods. So we imported $2 trillion worth of goods into the United States last year.
Wow.
And 100% tariff would be $2 trillion worth of income. The only difference would be it wouldn't come out of our production side. It would come out of our consumption side. So the working class would see, okay, anything you buy at Walmart just went up 100%.
So is that the amount that you're proposing? Because you had mentioned 100% twice. So you're proposing that we would put a 100% markup on that? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, there's a tariff at the border. So before at Walmart any container can come in from China, 100% of the declared value has to be collected by the Coast Guard or the IRS of the seas as a tax. Okay, now you've brought your goods into the United States. Presumably, they would add that to the price, and so now the item at the store, when it's physically delivered to the consumer, costs twice as much. They've got to double the price, which means that maybe a widget manufacturer will set it down the street and make the goods that they're now importing. So, the idea of a stiff tariff says you get competition from American industry again.
I'm saying this is not a new idea. This is something we had done for many, many, many years. And are there other countries around the world right now that are doing this still?
Well, they do it to us. I think this is what Donald Trump means by the fair trade thing. So we let the Chinese, for example, dump their goods into the United States, but you can't go to China and buy American goods. You can buy, you can't buy anything else in the United States. But in China, American goods are very hard to come by because they're restricted as they enter the marketplace. I was speaking to a friend last week who's in Argentina. Now, they flood us with leather goods, no tariff, but yet he has blown an engine in his Dodge Durango, and he said, well, there's only 4 in, the whole country, and I can't get parts, and if I do, they cost 3 times as much here as they do there. Why? Well, because tariffs. So, the rest of the world is building their industry and their economy at our expense, and our leaders really don't have the courage to fight back and say, hey, well, I've seen a little bit of gumption out of the House and the President, but, the idea of calling China a currency manipulator should be well established. It shouldn't have to be debated. This is what they do. They devalue their currency so that their goods are cheaper than ours, and then manufacturers move or put out of business because they can't compete with the Chinese yuan and the Chinese labor and bypassing environmental regulations and so forth. So we can make up for all that with a stiff import tariff. The President's currently suggesting a $10 a barrel tax on oil. Everyone. So that would really further kill the domestic oil producers. However, a $20 tariff on imported oil would make U.S. oil $20 cheaper. And so then we'd be back to drilling. We'd be back to creating jobs. It's a simple formula. You say, you look at the American plan at the founding of this nation. It was a central bank owned by the government that generates a profit, and take that profit from the tariffs and the central bank revenues and reinvest them in internal improvements. So, that's how they built all the post roads and the canals in the eastern United States, with a combination of income from the bank and tariffs from the imports. Now we've given the central bank over to a group of private banks. Of course, they do pay us rent every year, but the profits that they generate are enormous. I mean, they're gigantic. The Federal Reserve and its constituent units take all of that money. We don't see any of that. And then we give all of our import partners free passes, both in income tax and in tariffs. So we really have no source of revenue. And that income tax for United States citizens, as well as the Social Security tax, which is used like an income tax, it's diverted into the income tax stream. It makes us pay 40 to 50% of our total income in one tax or another, and that's why we just can't get ahead as Americans.
Again, our guest today is Andy Gause, one of America's foremost experts on history of U.S. currency, and very knowledgeable in so many areas, and it's always fun to chat. Now, we were talking today about the plan to really make America great again by replacing income tax with import tariffs. One of the companies that you had mentioned was Walmart, so we'll use that as an example. What kind of thing would we see happen to big importers like Walmart if there were tariffs that were added to the price of their products? Would this be good for them, bad for them, good for the country, bad for the country? How do you see that?
If you weigh what you buy at Walmart or in other imported goods, and say to yourself, okay, if that amount is now going to double, is it more or less than I'm currently paying in income tax? And more importantly, if in fact I can source this product domestically, then it might even be cheaper than the import, whereas it used to be more expensive. And so suddenly demand increases for domestically produced goods. Additionally, if I would traditionally buy something new from one of those buy a new foreign car every 2 years kind of guy, well, I'm going to pay a stiff tariff for that instead of buying a domestic car and fixing it when it breaks. So it may encourage, especially for those marginal folks who see it as a way to save money. If you use that system properly, you save money. But to somebody who doesn't care, who's paying $5,000 for a Louis Vuitton bag, or flying around in imported aircraft, or driving around in imported chauffeur-driven vehicles, I'm certain it's not going to matter to them. Of course, if it does, they have the same choice. They can find a domestically sourced product, which what it means is it'll concentrate production in the United States.
So this could actually help create jobs.
The magic word. What's been lacking for the last 2 decades that they've been selling us this free trade nonsense? Have we tried it? Okay, we tried it. It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? because our government is not tough enough to take on the foreign powers that say, oh, here's how we get around. We sell our goods in their country, and they, of course, play fair. When they go to sell their goods in our country, we won't play fair. The Japanese are notorious for this in their beef and rice, and I mean, it goes across. The best story I've ever heard has to do with our chicken producers.
Yeah.
We take the chicken and we cut the feet off, use them maybe as fertilizer. These are excess feet and beaks we don't care anything about. But in China, this is a delicacy. They'll do the opposite. They'll cut the feet off a chicken and throw the rest of the chicken away just to get those chicken feet. They make soup. They make delicacies with it. They have a real taste for it, more so than the rest of the bird. And so this means there's a heavy demand for chicken feet in China. No demand in the United States. Okay, free trade. How about we load a couple of containers with frozen chicken feet and send them to China, which we do. What do the Chinese do? Immediately, 130% tariff on imported poultry. How do you compete? The one thing that we might make cheaper than China, the one thing, and we send it, and they reject it with 130% tariff. So that's not free trade. It's not even fair trade. That's like a one-sided trade deal. They get to dump their stuff here tax-free. We can't. For all intents and purposes, sell there.
Again, our guest today, Andrew Gause. And Andrew, I could listen to you for hours and hours and hours because I find this very fascinating. And if listeners want to learn more, I wish we had more time. I know we don't. But if they want to learn more about what you're talking about, they can get a free CD that explains the U.S. monetary system and how to protect their wealth in today's uncertain economy. How do they go about getting a hold of that?
Call us, 800-468-2646. You're right. I have 3 audio CDs. The definition of money. What the heck is a dollar anyway? The Federal Reserve. How does it operate? What's it all about? And the third, protecting your wealth. That tells you how to convert your Federal Reserve money into what the Constitution defines as money. And you can get those easily. Just again, mention you heard it on the show and call 800-468-2646.
Andrew, thank you again for taking some time to chat. I'm sure I'll be reaching out again in the future. There's always things to talk about, and you've got the answers.
Thank you, my friend.
Again, Andrew Gause right there. He's one of America's foremost experts on the history of U.S. currency. Very knowledgeable man. If you'd like to get a copy of one of those CDs, I'll give you that number. I jotted it down when he gave it to us here. It's 800-468-2646. Make sure you tell him you heard it from John Small on PoliticalStorm.com. The preceding broadcast you just heard has been executive produced by Lawrence Rassin, co-founder of PoliticalStorm.com, line produced, edited, and narrated by John Small. Hey, that's me, from the John and Heidi Show and Sunny Radio. This program is expressly for PoliticalStorm.com and its affiliated networks and was recorded on Thursday, March 17th, 2016. For PoliticalStorm.com, I'm John Small.